Let me pull up my doc.
Wait, are you saying that these podcasts aren't completely improvised? Are you saying that some preparation goes into this?
No, they are improvised. I just have a doc of like affirmations that I read to myself. So it's just like, keep going, Alan. You're doing a great job. Like, I'll just read through that list.
Some people actually have those, I think, like on Post-it notes, and I could see that working for like enhanced recovery, where it's like you wake up in the mirror, it's like carb load today. All right, I'm down.
So today we thought it would be a great time to kind of look back on our past episodes, talk about what our favorite episodes were and why. Also, I thought it would be interesting to share some of the feedback that we've gotten from our listeners. A great place to start, Josh, I think, is to just go right from the top. Do you want to give us one or two or three of your top episodes?
Yeah, how about like I give you one and then we'll go to you. We'll kind of go like some back and forth.
Yeah, I like it. Very inclusive.
That's how I am. All right. So I think for my, again, this is not an order. This is just more like after taking the scan, what were three that stood out for me? So I'd say the first one I'll share is actually podcast number 1, company origins. So for those who didn't see this one, you're way behind schedule. But for those who did, you'll remember it's the one where we basically talked about the SeamlessMD backstory of how the company, started and how we learned about, different challenges in the patient experience, and then how we ended up growing SeamlessMD over time. And really a lot of that evolution was inspired by a lot of the, clinical partners and customers that we work with. Mm-hmm. And the reason it stood out, I think mostly for me, Alan, was, number one, it's always fun to like reflect on like where we started and how much we've grown as a team and as an organization. But I think for those who don't know, like Alan and I started this podcast, I think near the beginning of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And that's not why we started it, but we had talked for probably at least a couple of years, or at least at various, at least once or twice a year, we'd bring up like, hey, we should start like a podcast or a show of some kind. And we would always just like bring it up as like a brainstorm and then never actually do it. And then I think when COVID hit, I don't know why, Alan, but we kind of said, hey, like, let's just do it. And I think the mindset we used was, let's just like do one episode, maybe two, see what happens, put it out there. And just be willing to like be vulnerable with that. So I think for me, more than the content, it was just episode 1 represents us taking the leap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Actually, I don't have that in my top 3 episodes because I saw that you actually listed it, but it is one of my favorite episodes as well. And I think for the points that you mentioned, like the point of starting this podcast was kind of just to show, the industry, who is SeamlessMD and what's SeamlessMD all about. And that first episode, you're right, we had talked about maybe starting a podcast or a show of some kind to really highlight customers and highlight different parts of SeamlessMD. And I think that's always kind of the scariest part is how do you start something? How do you launch something that's brand new and put it out into the world? And so I'll always kind of cherish that episode because that is really the beginnings of this show. And that to me is kind of beautiful.
Definitely. And actually, Alan, maybe I'll just like share one tidbit from the episode to catch someone's eye if they haven't seen it. During the first year that Seamless started, we almost went into veterinary care. And I think we might have bought the seamlesspets.com domain or something like it. If you're curious about that story and how the heck that would ever happen, you got to watch that episode.
Yeah, I think it was called Seamless Pets.
I think so.
Yeah.
Available now if someone wants it.
That's a good one. Yeah. All right. My top episode, and again, this is not in a particular order either. I just chose, 3 episodes that I really enjoyed. My top episode was actually the one we did with Dr. Jehangir Appoo. So for those of you who don't know or don't recall that episode, Jehangir was previously a cardiac surgeon who's now turned a venture capital investor. And I really enjoyed that episode for a number of reasons, but I think primarily was because it takes a very high level approach to virtual care and the future of healthcare and healthcare technology from a clinical perspective, but also now from an investor kind of perspective and outlook of the industry at large. And I think in particular why I like that episode was obviously we had an extraordinary guest on it, which obviously makes it a great episode to listen to. But I think also there was one topic in that episode that I found particularly fascinating, and it was based on a tweet that Jehangir had put out that was illustrating kind of the frameworks for thinking about virtual care. Jehangir mentioned on Twitter that there was 4 kind of categories for virtual care, four functions of virtual care that are especially relevant and important for virtual care to be successful. And I'll just kind of quickly summarize those again. So the first one was an online interface with security and good user experience. The second one was remote patient monitoring. Third one was machine learning and analytics. And then the fourth one was patient engagement tools and patient-reported outcomes. And I recall from the episode, it was kind of all 4 of those working in tandem with each other is what makes virtual care so great. It's this value exchange of information to a patient and then back to the healthcare organization. And that's kind of the framework for looking at what great virtual care is. So that definitely was one of my favorite episodes. We go off into a lot of tangents in that one. We talk about chatbots at one point. But yeah, so I love that episode for sure.
Yeah, me too. And like, Jehangir's been also a great, mentor, an investor for SeamlessMD. And one of the things that I really enjoy about his story and why I think even a lot of folks who, aren't in the startup or tech world, but I appreciate the podcast is that, this is someone who, had personal health, challenges where they basically forced him to not be able to operate in cardiac surgery anymore. And yet so quickly he was able to, find like new passions in, healthcare technology and AI healthcare investing and all these other really incredible things that he's working on now. And so he was someone that didn't just mope around and say, oh, like I can't operate anymore. Like, he said, hey, you know what, this is an opportunity to kind of move healthcare forward in another way. And I think that's just a fantastic story. And it reminds me of, actually, just side note, I saw this presentation once by a gentleman named Jordan Banks, who actually used to be the managing director of Facebook Canada and really, really, successful like technology executive. And he was doing this presentation to, I think it was like I want to say the graduating class of Western University or something like that. And he was talking about how early on in our lives, we're always taught to, plan out our entire future, our entire career. And he kind of shared how, like when you look back at your life 5, 10, 20 years from now, pretty much like the plan you had set for your career, what you thought was going to happen is going to be very, very different. Not in a bad way. It's just, it's very hard to predict the future, right? So the important thing is like being open-minded to how the world changes, opportunities that come your way, and being like engaged in just navigating those changes. And you end up being surprised by how different like your life is like 10 years from now. And if with the right attitude, it's a very positive thing. So I think Jehangir is actually a great example of like, hey, like, I don't think he planned for this by any means, but like, I think 5, 10 years from now, when he looks back, he'd be like, wow, it's pretty cool that I did this stuff. Anyways.
No, and actually that was a point that he made in the episode as well, was looking back and his definition of luck and being at the right place at the right time. And yeah, looking at a setback as an opportunity and kind of flipping it around in the mental models he uses.
Absolutely.
What's another episode you love, Josh?
Yeah, so another one I'll point out is, so we did an episode with Meherazade, our director of customer success, on best practices for implementing digital patient engagement solutions. And so for those who aren't familiar, one of the things that happens when an organization partners with SeamlessMD is, we don't just hand you the technology and say, hey, I hope it works for you. Good luck with this. We actually have a whole team led by Meherazade that actually works with the healthcare organization to not only, implement the platform and like customize it and train staff and all that, but also support them ongoing for the life of the partnership in providing best practices and feedback and troubleshooting and all kinds of things in partnership, strategic, advice, sharing learnings from other partners, etc. And it reminds me of, I forget who taught me this, but the idea that like the outcome of a technology solution is based on both the quality of the technology, but also the quality of the implementation and the support for it.
Right.
And so there's a lot of really great nuggets in that episode about how, like the tech of Seamless is great. It truly is. But it's also the support that we provide behind it and the best practices for helping organizations get patients using it successfully. That's really critical to success. So that's one reason why I like it. The other reason actually why I like the episode is because actually it's a really good example of how these podcasts, Alan, have had really interesting side effects and side benefits beyond, beyond like helping the market understand Seamless. It's actually been a really great tool for candidates and future hires for the company. So for example, and I'll say this not because I'm trying to market this is how you should succeed in the hiring process, but because if you're actually hearing this, it means you're doing your research on Seamless, which I respect, right? But there's so many candidates who actually tell us that they watch the podcast and use it to learn about Seamless to either get excited about SeamlessMD, or they actually learn things about SeamlessMD that they then use in the interview process to impress us about their knowledge and stuff like that. And so I always I'm pleasantly surprised at how often the podcast is used in different parts of the company and in ways we just didn't see coming. I think we hoped that would be a good recruiting tool, but we never really knew that they would watch it.
Yeah,
we'll watch this stuff.
Yeah.
Among those millions of viewers, Alan, there are a handful of candidates, and they're looking to join a company like ours. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Definitely. Yeah. And actually, Josh, we were talking about this a little earlier. I didn't plan to bring it up, but we were talking about the fact that if we had a candidate who came in and actually disagreed with something that we said on the podcast, that shows, A, they've listened to the podcast and they've understood what we're saying, but then B, it also shows that they have a brain for themselves and they're thinking, and if they can back up why they disagree, how we'd actually appreciate that, because we're looking for the truth on all things. And if somebody can actually explain why they disagree with something from a particular episode, I feel like that's going to give them a leg up. That's something that we look for is somebody who can. And it's funny, I say this, and now we're going to get a ton of candidates just
I was going to say the same thing.
But I think the point of it is, we didn't know what would happen with the podcast, who would be listening to it, and how it would actually affect different parts of the company in terms of, let's say, hiring. And it's kind of really cool to see that. It's neat to see the kind of ripple effect of the podcast entering different areas, not just with the industry, but also with candidates. It's really neat.
Well, and I mean, so I'll say a couple more things on that topic. One is is a kind of like a half joke, but we should, if someone says that they watched a podcast episode, we should ask them what they thought about a topic that was brought up at the end of the podcast to find out if they actually listened all the way through.
Right. How many people skim through it?
Funny thing to do if someone brings it up. But the other thought I had was just in terms of unintended side effects of the podcast. For those who don't know, Alan actually recently was invited by the Can Health Network, which is a national consortium of Canadian hospitals and organizations and companies to accelerate adoption of healthcare technology. Alan was recently invited to, I think, co-present one of the sessions along with Deloitte for this consortium on, I think, implementing new healthcare innovations or something like that. And so the reason that happened was because they said, "Oh, wow, Alan, we really liked you on the Seamless podcast. Would you be interested in co-presenting a session?" I mean, who knew that was going to happen?
It's true. Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. Profound effects. I like that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna jump in with my second favorite episode. Again, it's not in a particular order, but the episode that was released last week called "The Top 7 Myths for Digital Patient Engagement." Why I like that episode so much was I found it was just a great clarification episode. So it clarified a number of different topics related to virtual care, related to digital patient engagement. And it kind of hit on a number of different things. So talking about the implementation process, for instance, and why that's important or equally as important as the technology itself. Also talking about what is telemedicine, what is virtual care, and how do you distinguish digital patient engagement from those larger kind of umbrella terms. So I thought that was a great episode. It definitely had me thinking a lot about digital patient engagement and where it fits in this broad spectrum of technologies that are available. And so if you haven't heard that episode, that's definitely a great one to take a listen to and understand kind of the nuances and intricacies of digital patient engagement.
Absolutely. I think it really does touch on a lot of understandable, natural misconceptions that
Yeah.
someone new to this type of technology would have. And by the way, I think those things would have, they definitely came up years ago when we started SeamlessMD. Some of them still come up now. The difference is that we actually have the data and the experience to address a lot of those misconceptions. So a lot of progress has happened, but a lot of those myths are still kind of natural and, you know, inherent myths that I would think about too if I was new to this. So we definitely come a long way in dispelling a lot of those myths for sure. Actually, you know, if you're trying to bring something like Seamless into your organization and your executives are pushing back on, well, older patients use this, like, you know,
That's right. Yeah.
et cetera, get them to watch the podcast.
Yeah. I think I touched on older patients. Also, one of the other topics from that episode was around, or I guess myths from the episode was around, can my nurses just do exactly what SeamlessMD is doing? And I think that one in particular comes up a lot because that's, you know, at the essence of what SeamlessMD is doing. Yes, theoretically, a person could do that, could do exactly what SeamlessMD is doing, follow up with the patient, remind the patient, track the patient, how they're doing in their progress, collect, you know, information from the patients, and then report it back into the EHR or a system like that. But I think it goes above and beyond because it's also taking a look at, well, let's theoretically or hypothetically examine what a person would have to do in place of a technology. And it pretty naturally comes to the conclusion that it's not really scalable to have a person doing that job for every single patient. So I liked that point from the podcast as well. That was one of the myths. I think maybe one of the later ones.
Yeah, on that note, Alan, I mean, for me, a big part of like what's exciting about Seamless and technologies like Seamless is how do we help like providers like such as, you know, nurses execute at the height of their expertise, right? So like ideally, I would think like the nursing team would want to focus on like, okay, who are our most complex, like acutely sick patients right now? Whether they're in hospital, I need to spend time on them, or whether they're at home, I need to help them. But, you know, is their time really well spent doing like daily post-discharge phone calls to patients where 80% of them are probably doing fine, where they're asking the same 10 questions?
Yeah.
Like, why can't we automate that for them so that they can actually like really use their expertise on the patients who would benefit the most from that expertise? I mean, that's how I think about it too. So, yeah, you're right. Totally. It's a time thing too, but it's also like they're so skilled. Why do we have to spend their time doing things that something like Seamless could you know, help to care for them? So
and then they would have more time doing what they're actually trained to do, the skills around it. Yeah, for sure.
So I guess I'll give you my last one in terms of three that stood out to me. So this one we actually did with Robert Ritlop, who's actually the director of investments at MEDTEQ, which actually led our Series A financing. What I liked about this episode was mostly just Robert's like candidness about his perspectives on healthcare technology and adoption of healthcare innovation and a lot of the barriers in the market. And I just appreciate that in general, not because he had a lot of insights and that was one thing, but also I think oftentimes in healthcare, because it's generally such a very positive thinking culture, which I actually like and I think and I appreciate, but sometimes that mass you know, transparency and direct communication and being willing to admit failure and you know, being willing to you know, pick on things that we're not doing well. And so the fact that someone like Robert is in this kind of industry and is so candid and and willing to explore like unconventional ideas. I think that's just refreshing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also just it was fun to hear from the investor's perspective, right? Because all the time people hear about the hospital perspective or the company perspective, but a lot of the success of innovation is coming from support from investors like Robert and MEDTEQ. So hearing his perspective on why would a VC fund invest in something like Seamless, I think our listeners would have found very interesting.
Yeah. You had a very, very positive, nice way of saying it was a very controversial episode. I actually quite enjoyed that episode as well. I think it had me laughing internally the most out of all of the episodes that we put out. And I think it's also because we agree with a lot of the points that he brought up. So, I mean, if we disagreed with it, maybe we would challenge or push back on some things. But a lot of it, he was speaking the truth, and it was very direct and candid. I definitely appreciate that episode for sure. And Robert, I would have back on the podcast anytime. I thought that was really fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
The third episode that I've highlighted, this was with our very own Denice Koo. She's the director of patient education at SeamlessMD. The episode was on health literacy and accessibility. And I like this episode for basically the same reasons that you liked the implementation episode, was because there is a lot of work that goes behind the scenes in developing a digital patient engagement program, particularly around the education on the platform. And health literacy and accessibility. On that episode, we really touched on the kind of intricacies of what is health literacy and how do you apply best practices for adult learning and behavior change into the education on a platform. And I thought Denice did a really great job of highlighting the different steps that she takes and her team takes in making sure that the content on the system is actually digestible by patients. So it's for instance, she touched on the grade 6 reading level, making sure that we're accessible to maybe people who are colorblind, and by having contrast testing, colorblind testing. There's the screen reader friendly portion to the platform, so it can actually read the content to you if you're blind or hard of seeing. And so all of these little itty bits of knowledge that Denice has and she's learned throughout her career and then put into the system, I think is really why it's so successful when it comes to actually engaging with patients, how we hit those high engagement rates and how we get patients to actually stay motivated with their care, and they're empowered to actually take action and do the steps that they need to do. And a lot of that comes down to health literacy and accessibility. So it's not just taking an education piece of paper and putting it onto a system, but it's actually what from this education is the most important parts, and then how do I translate it into a digital medium so that it's interactive and stays engaging with the patient. They actually get the right information at the right time, and all of that needs to be planned and really thoughtfully drawn out. And Denice did a fantastic job explaining that in the podcast, and kind of even way more detailed than what I'm saying right here, because it was, I think, a 40-minute episode or even an hour. So that for me stood out. That was one of my favorite episodes that we've done so far.
Yeah, and I think what it highlights really well is like when people talk about the idea that for a clinical solution like this, not only does the technology matter, but the clinical content matters. I think what they fail to realize is that a patient engagement solution like SeamlessMD is different than a very, let's call it, provider-centric solution, like I don't know, like UpToDate, for example, it's a fantastic. Hey to our friends at Walters Kluwer, we are friends with them, so I can say this, but they have a great product, UpToDate, right, where clinicians use it to look up guidelines and like best practices for treating different illnesses and all that kind of stuff. And it's well designed for clinicians. And so they have expert content on there. But when it comes to patient engagement, I think sometimes some companies think that, oh, if we just have, a bunch of clinical experts put content on a technology, that's all we need to do. And that's clinical content expertise. But they don't realize that, okay, no, actually, when you're engaging a patient, it's not just about the fact that you have the right clinical content, but what matters is how you deliver that clinical content. And that goes beyond just the technology things, like having electronic reminders and tasks and and progress tracking. It's actually, well, what words do we use?
Right.
And the font size and the literacy levels, and translating that using all the things that Denice's team does around behavioral change theory and adult learning, things that have been proven, even on paper, to better drive patient comprehension. Very often those things are not appreciated or understood, frankly, by clinicians. And I can say that I'm a former clinician. Like, I get it. Like, I don't learn that in medical school. Like, no one teaches you how to properly communicate with the patient with the right, language and phrasing and all that. You just get taught clinical like knowledge, right? And so I think, like, to your point, it's a really important episode because it actually highlights it's clinical content when it comes to patient engagement is more than just the clinical content. It's like the delivery of it, like, really matters. And I almost feel like it's hard to truly understand it unless you've been a patient who can't understand what your clinicians are telling you or what the papers say. Like, there's probably a lot of patients who don't tell you, by the way. What patient's going to tell their doctor, I didn't understand this.
Right.
That doesn't happen, right?
Exactly.
So anyways.
Yeah, definitely. To your point about the words that we select and the words that we're using on the content, I'm bringing up another episode, but the cancer care episode that we had around, there's obviously these patients are sometimes and oftentimes in psychological distress. And so making sure that the language is very sensitive to those needs of that patient. And so it's very, very particular in the word choice so that it's empowering and not disempowering language and different topics like that. I do have one bonus episode, Josh, just because I like the number 7. So why not end with 7 episodes as opposed to 6? The bonus episode that I chose, this is actually, as you mentioned, we have 8 million or so listeners on pretty much every episode, but this episode in particular didn't have the amount of views that I believe is warranted for the episode. And the episode was one of the earlier ones on Prehab. And it is a very niche topic, and that's, probably why it was, just the people who are really interested in Prehab really listened to that episode. But I love that episode because there was a lot of research done for it, which is, just patting myself on the back. But also, I think it's kind of the next part of like enhanced recovery, where enhanced recovery was really big, today, and maybe it started 15, 20 years ago. Prehab is kind of in its infancy as well. So today it's kind of where enhanced recovery was 15 years ago, where I think more and more groups are kind of seeing the literature on it and are realizing, hey, we need to prehab our patients if we can. And so I definitely think that's an episode worth watching, because it also talks about how digital patient engagement makes that implementation so easy and so effortless. You can kind of add prehab as a module to an existing program. And we quote a lot of studies in that episode. So I really like that episode on prehab. We draw a lot from the University of Michigan, who's kind of they were one of the first groups to do prehab and really study its effects. And so I really like that episode. I feel it deserves a bonus shout out.
For sure. I mean, for me, like the crazy thing about prehab is that it's not as widespread yet as it should be and could be. And the funny thing for me is that, again, like it's probably because there's not as much literature on prehab as there is on enhanced recovery.
Yeah.
But prehab in many ways is actually easier to implement than enhanced recovery. Like enhanced recovery, you have to go like pathway by pathway or service line by service line, right? Because like ERAS for gynecology is somewhat different from colorectal, which is somewhat different from pancreas, liver, cardiac, etc.
There's multiple stakeholders that you need engaged.
Yeah, but prehab, like protocol wise, you could probably create a standardized prehab protocol that like every major surgery patient uses in your organization. Like everyone walk this many steps before surgery, use the incentives barometer, eat better, right? Stop smoking, mindfulness. You could literally put the same protocol across your entire surgical department and get significant benefit. And it's way more scalable than enhanced recovery. And I'm shocked that it's not more widespread. Like I'm totally shocked that it's not more of a lower hanging fruit almost than ERAS. ERAS is more popular. That's the thing. It's more popular, it's more literature. But I think to your point, we're going to see a growth in prehab over the next couple of years. And I think it'll probably come, and from what we've seen now, it's come from folks who've said, hey, I've done ERAS already. What's phase 2? Oh, let's put prehab in front of it. So that's probably what's going to happen. I'm just surprised like it hasn't gone the other way where it's like, and I think part of it too, Alan, and I'm just digressing a bit, but it's like probably because ERAS is so popular, a lot of organizations are saying, oh, have we done ERAS yet? They're not saying, hey, that group's doing prehab.
Right.
Have we done that yet? That's probably part of it, right? Because ERAS is becoming a thing, so then people want to get that done first, right? It's the thing everyone else is doing. So kind of makes sense too, you know? So actually, mad respect to, you know, the folks at, you know, Recco Carly, Leanne Feldman, the team at McGill, and mad respect to, you know, Mike Anglesby and the team at Michigan for, you know, frankly doing it when no one else was in North America. Takes a lot of conviction to just go ahead and do it and not care if anyone else is doing it yet.
Yeah. And you're talking about Prehab because they also did enhanced recovery quite early as well. That those same kind of groups, they're definitely thought leaders in quality and patient safety. I think also just kind of finishing that topic, if there is an ERAS program already in place, it's a lot easier to add Prehab because, you know, we already have the stakeholders, we already have the materials for patients. Let's just add on to it.
It's true.
So it does kind of make sense to do, you know, ERAS first because that's the harder one to implement. So presumably once you've done
by the way, I'm totally underestimating like the idea that you can get a whole like every surgical department bought in to do prehab in the first place. That is way harder than it sounds.
Yeah, I think one of the most challenging things in any industry is change management. So just getting people to change practice. That's, you know, one of the most challenging things to do. All right, awesome. So those are the top 7 episodes, I guess, of 2020 for the SeamlessMD podcast. At least the top 7 that Josh and I have in our heads,
which makes it the actual top 7. So
right. Yeah. Obviously, we don't care about what other people think of the episodes. But if you guys had favorite episodes, I keep saying guys, you guys and gals, anyone out there who's listening, if you had favorite episodes that you particularly enjoyed, let us know. And actually, this is a good segue, Josh.
Well, actually, Alan, and on that note, if anyone has guests that they want on the podcast, or if they want to volunteer to be a guest, like throw your name in the ring. We will thoroughly vet
we'll
all the guests,
of
course, but we're not ring. Sorry, hat. Ring sounds like a fight. Throw your name in the hat.
Yeah, we're a very collaborative bunch.
Yeah,
we're not all about fighting. That's good. So actually, good segue here, Josh. I do want to bring up what some of our listeners have said about the podcast. We actually do have, believe it or not, maybe not 8 million viewers on every episode, but we do have a consistent group of clinicians and listeners of this podcast who do write into us and they let us know what they liked about the podcast. I don't think we've gotten any negative comments yet. I think it would be kind of funny if we did, but I think the point of this podcast is to be informative and spread kind of the best practices that we've heard of through working with different organizations on digital patient engagement. The first comment that I wanted to share, this is one of our earlier responses that we got from our listeners, from the feedback that we've received. This is from someone who's listening, a clinician out there who said that they wanted to say that they love the podcast, lots of insights, and apparently, Josh, our dynamic, mine and yours, makes it next level. And they dubbed the dynamic awkward and proud of it, which honestly I agree with. I think that's pretty much us, and I love that they kind of connected the dots there. They did mention a memorable moment was, and I looked back to figure out who said this, and apparently I said it. We were talking about color by numbers, or like paint by numbers, with Malvina on the bariatric surgery episode. And she mentioned that she's doing this paint by numbers. And I think you asked, well, has this color by numbers thing been around like for a long time? And I said, apparently, I think color by numbers has been around ever since there were colors and numbers. And it was a very subtle joke near the end of the episode. And I love that this person commented on it and thought that was pretty funny as well. So that was one comment that I particularly enjoyed from our listeners. I have a few more comments if you want me to read through some of these. So somebody else mentioned that they love the show. Apparently that's how all of these comments start.
We had a lot of those, by the way. We don't have time to go like share all of like
right.
those Love the show comments. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of them are just, they leave it there. Love the show. Keep doing what you're doing. But this one was, I love the show. So informative and detailed. And they also apparently make dirty chais now. So this was I guess it started as a little trend, a little thing. Like I think in our second episode, I just mentioned, hey, I combined a coffee with a chai tea and I'm calling it dirty chai. And then I think I did a callback to it on another episode saying, hey, I made a dirty chai again, just kind of in passing. But it's kind of neat that, Josh, we're obviously influencers now and somebody has gone ahead and made their own dirty chai. So I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, I think you've earned like an espresso or a Starbucks endorsement or some sponsorship. So,
I agree. Yeah. Yeah. So
espresso,
if anybody,
Starbucks, if you're listening, like we'll put you on here. Just, I think Alan and I will take free coffee for life, right? Free dirty chais for life. We'll bring you on here.
Yeah, that's the bare minimum. Coffee for life.
That's the real business model of the company. We're going to grow this podcast. We're going to, get a ton of
sponsors. Yeah. We did a shout out once to I think Microsoft. So Bill Gates, if he's listening, obviously we need sponsorship as well.
Give me that free Microsoft Office,
All right, and the last comment that I grabbed for this podcast, this is a listener who actually it's about you, Josh. It's they wondered if we're recording this in your bedroom because of the closet. And I put this here because I think it's a funny story. You've explained it to me off the podcast, but I think our listeners deserve to know as well. Is this your bedroom? What's with the closet?
Yeah, so just I know listeners are really worried that I do everything. I live out of this one room, but don't worry. This is not the only room that I partake in. This is like my office room at my home since I'm spending a lot more time remote from the office during the pandemic. But this here, my dresser back there, this is, what is it, like 8-9 feet tall, something like that. Anyways, this dresser doesn't fit in any other room in my place. So it just like, it's been in here forever, as long as I lived here. And so by the way, also like I've tried positioning my webcam away from the closet, but my lighting just gets much worse.
Yeah.
So sometimes when I'm having a meeting with a hospital or a partner, I'm trying to like minimize the closet.
But it just gets dark.
But then the lighting gets worse, and so I kind of end up in the middle somewhere. And so I've just kind of said, whatever, like they can see the closet. It's led to some funny conversations though. I was talking to an executive at one of our hospital customers, and he sees a closet and he goes, "Oh, Josh, are you living out of your closet?" I'm like, "Are times that bad?"
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, no. But
that's good.
Yeah, no, it's definitely been a funny conversation point. I am moving to a new place in the next couple of months, so I don't think you'll see this that much longer. So you're gonna have to cherish it while it lasts.
Right. That's great. I like it. It's been there since day one, on the first episode all the way. We're on episode 28 now, if you can believe it.
It's funny. I think one of our teammates, Danielle, who's been on a number of podcasts, I think she commented that she doesn't think anything in that closet has moved. And I'm like, yeah, you're probably right, because like 90% of what's on here, like dress shirts and things that just haven't worn in all in most 2020, right? So I had no reason to
move it,
for anything to be moved, to be honest.
Right. Unless you just want to do your weekly move and you move the clothes around just every week.
I should do that.
You don't wear them, you just move them around.
Well, the clothes, like when they talk, they're just like, Josh, like getting kind of tired being next to this other guy. Like the red shirt's like annoyed the blue shirt. It's been a whole year. Like, we gotta move them around.
Yeah. I think Josh, you've been remote for too long now. If you believe your clothes are talking to you.
I just think you're not listening closely enough, Alan, if you're not hearing your clothes.
Yeah. That's more likely. Awesome. So Josh, I want to do, whenever we have a guest on the show, we've been asking them a fast 5 round or a lightning round of questions where we ask 5 questions and they can answer it as succinctly as they would like. This time I thought it would be interesting if we both did a fast 5 with each other, and we can ask the same questions and we can just answer them how we would. So I've picked kind of our favorite questions that we've been asking guests based on their responses and based on the feedback from our listeners, what they enjoyed the most in hearing. And so I do have 5 questions. I can run through them. I don't know if you want to go, I'll ask a question, then you can answer, and then I'll give my answer, or back and
Yeah,
forth.
let's both do
And
the
wrap.
same questions.
Okay.
Together, yeah.
Not to confuse everyone, yeah. So the first question that we got is, what is your favorite book or book you've gifted the most?
Yeah, so I definitely don't have a book that I've gifted the most. I actually don't. I have a hard time thinking of a favorite book, but what I did think about was just kind of just enjoying like reflection. It's like what are the books I read the most as a kid?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that makes a big difference on inspiring like kids to grow up like enjoying reading.
Mm.
And curious to know if everyone's read this, but I think that the book I read the most as a kid was book one of the Boxcar Children. Have you heard of this series? It's a whole series of
Boxcar.
The Boxcar Children. And the gist of it is, it was like a children's series.
It's like a Hardy Boy, like a mystery kind of. No,
it might be, but I only really read book one.
okay.
Or I read that the most. I didn't really read any. I think that's the only one I had at home, maybe. But anyways, basically, it's about these like four kids who were like recently orphaned, and they're siblings. And basically, they get lost, and they find this abandoned box car on like a train track, and they basically figure out how to live there without any resources. Like they figure out how to like I think grow their shelter, like find food, build clothes from nothing, stuff like that. Get odd jobs to make money, and somehow they use it to like make food for themselves, and eventually they get out of that situation. But it was just like a really creative story about, it's not really quite Survivor, but it's almost as if they were having to be survivors in the woods. It's just like a really interesting tale that I enjoyed as a kid. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
It was originally published in 1924.
Since I've been around.
So yeah, it's definitely been around. I wonder, it's probably changed. Like, I mean, you've probably read different editions of it, but
no, just cool. The one in my parents' basement. But
right, that they've had in their family for generations.
No, I think we bought it like a garage sale.
A garage sale, yeah. Nice. For the book that I picked, I didn't choose one from my childhood. This is a book that I've actually come across fairly recently, in the past like 2-3 years. And the book is called Awareness by Anthony DeMello. I love this book. I think it's not for everyone. It's definitely a book. If you're fairly open-minded, it's definitely a book for you. And it's basically Anthony DeMello was, I guess, not only an author, but he was a famous philosopher, and kind of looks at the idea of awareness and what awareness is, and what the I is in what you're being aware of. And it basically just shows there's a lot more to know about oneself than we often take that for granted. So I think it's a book that's been recommended by different folks like Naval Ravikant. He's recommended the book. So if Naval's recommended it, then clearly you have to go read it. But that to me it's a book that's stuck with me. So I read it 2.5 years ago. It's stuck with me. I've reread it. I love the book a lot. And I think it just helps people live a fulfilled life. So question number 2, what is your favorite film or TV show?
Yeah, I'll give you both.
Okay.
So film has changed over time. So I think growing up, I really liked October Sky. Haven't seen it. It's a great film with Jake Gyllenhaal, where he's like this high school kid who like falls in love with building rockets, and then enters like a science fair with his rockets, and his dad wants him to be a coal miner like him. But anyways, it's based on a true story where the character ends up becoming, I think, a NASA scientist. Mm-hmm. It was just like a really inspiring story of like, a kid following, his dreams and
right
for NASA. And then at some point it became A Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe and Jennifer Connelly, I think, right?
Yep.
And I don't want to spoil it, but just it's a fantastic story based on a true story about John Nash, that famous mathematician, mm-hmm. And kind of the struggles he had with his health issues and how that affected his success. But a really beautiful story, great movie. Mm-hmm. And then actually more recently, Arrival with, oh my gosh, what's the name of the actress, because all the red-haired actresses, I always think like there's like Isla Fisher, and then there's, gosh, I forget the ones who all look the same.
The one that you're looking for, yeah.
Yeah.
What is
oh
her
my
name?
gosh, I should know this.
I'm looking it up now. Amy Adams.
Amy Adams, fantastic
yeah.
actress.
I'm terrible with actors' names and.
There's a third one. There's Amy Adams. There's
Isla Fisher, Amy Adams. Oh, Jessica Chastain.
Okay, she was, but she was on my list. I was thinking of the one from Pitch Perfect. Oh gosh.
Pitch Perfect. Who's that?
It's pulling it up here. Anna Kendrick.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
They don't look identical, but you know what I mean, right?
They all have red hair. That's
red hair.
That's as identical as you can get. Yeah.
But Arrival is based on this really great book by an author, a sci-fi author, fantastic author, Ted Chiang. And if you wonder, I actually ended up reading the short story it's based on, called Story of Your Life. Even if you watch the movie, it's a great short story that's based on. And then I'll give you one TV show I really like right now, Succession. I think it won like one of the most recent Emmys for like best drama. Amazing, hilarious drama, if you will.
Yeah.
And if you haven't seen it yet, just wait for the episode about dogs on the. Is it called Dogs on the Ground? I forget, but
okay. Yeah.
Have you seen that, Alan?
No, I haven't.
Oh, sorry, dog on the floor.
You've told me about Succession.
Oh
I haven't seen it.
Like, this is the one show that I preach about. People have to watch Succession. Incredible show.
Cool. All right, I'll give my answer. So this is a very difficult question for me. Like Josh, my favorite movie changes all the time. But there is one director, writer-director who stands out to me, and it's either you love him or you hate him, and he gets a lot of flack from different audiences. But David Lynch is one of my favorite directors. And in particular, the movie that, for whatever reason, I love this movie. It's Mulholland Drive. And I think the reason why I love the movie is because there's so many different meanings that you can take from the film. Just to give a bit of perspective, David Lynch is not your average filmmaker. He's definitely not if you like to go and see a movie that has a very, distinct plot from start to finish and you can follow it, easily. David Lynch is not your cup of tea. David Lynch definitely plays a lot in the realm of emotion in his filmmaking. So it's very much a movie that you would feel as opposed to logically pieced together. Although what I do like about Mulholland Drive and a lot of David Lynch's works is he builds the movie in such a way where he's giving you clues and you're almost playing a detective in piecing together the film. And it's kind of interesting that a lot of his main characters are detectives and are people who are following clues and kind of piecing it together. So he's kind of meta in that regard. All right, question number 3, Josh. What is something in healthcare you believe that others might find insane?
Yeah, so actually we talked a bit about this on the podcast with Robert Ritlop from MEDTEQ. But one of the things that I wouldn't say people would think it's insane, but some might, but I sometimes have challenges with grants or grants, research grants being used to fund ideas that we hope will get commercialized. The reason being that just because like something gets grant approved, grant supported, doesn't tell you, and even if you can use that grant to prove that an innovation works and has a result and a positive impact on providers or patients, that actually tells you nothing about whether or not the market will adopt it and pay for it and fund it. And so there's been a lot of innovations, healthcare innovations in the market that have been funded by research grants and that actually work and achieve the benefit that they want. But then when they then take those study results and then go to hospital leadership and say, hey, the product has an impact on these metrics, can you buy it now? And then they find out that a hospital only buys things that like align with the top 5 priority, which is not most things, right? Because there's only 5 priorities every year. They don't get it. They're like, wait, but I proved it with the research grant and the results and all that. So one of my beliefs is that sometimes too many grants in the market might actually lead to a lot of like really important work done, but that had really limited chance of adoption in the first place. And it makes you wonder, could we have repurposed that funding for stuff? So I think there's better work being done now in healthcare around tying innovation funding to needs of health systems, hospice providers, but there's still a big gap where you can pretty much get research funding to fund anything, really, any question you want, knowing is there really a chance this could get adopted. Now, that being said, though, like that's part of why research is important, that you can ask questions. And I mean, who's to say it's a bad question, but I think it's a little bit tricky when you're talking about like stuff that you're trying to get adopted. It's just, it's tricky.
Especially around innovation and technology.
Yeah, because a lot of things help patients.
Right.
Most things help patients, but not everything can actually like get adopted, right? And anyways.
Yeah, no, that's a great one. Something that I believe that others might find insane. I think there's less and less people that find this one insane because there is more and more research on it. But I really very strongly believe in the power of placebo, and very much like, and I even see it in surgery. Like when patients believe that they're going to have a successful surgery, they tend to have more success with their surgery. But I think it extends beyond just surgery. I think even around, you know, different medications and the efficacy of pretty much any intervention. I think the mind is definitely a mysterious kind of powerhouse that can be harnessed in such ways of positive change. And also the nocebo, also the opposite is true. So if somebody believes that something will not have an effect, I think that does actually impact the results of things. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying the placebo is the only thing that's at play. Obviously, we have lots of proof and randomized controlled trials that are, you know, showing the efficacy of certain things like drugs and pharmaceuticals and things like that. But I definitely think the placebo plays a pretty large part in determining certain successes or failures of different things. And I think people would find that insane in some circles.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, I think that's almost another way of saying this is not exactly correct, but almost like, you know, perception is reality. So if your mind believes something is true, it becomes a reality. So if your mind believes that I'm not in pain anymore, you're not in pain anymore.
Right.
So I think that actually makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
All right. That's question 4. Question 5, or sorry, that was question 3. Question 4 is, would you rather have super strength, super speed, or the ability to read people's minds?
It was funny, Alan. I was gonna make a joke. We probably can't call it fast 5 anymore. I feel like for us, it's the long 5. Anyway,
the slowest 5 we've had. Yeah.
Like you and I
but we're doing it 2 times.
Yeah. Hear our thoughts on this. That's why.
Yeah, and we're also answering technically 10 questions.
Yeah. Okay. 5.
So it's a double. Anyways, super strength, super speed, or the ability to read people's minds.
Yeah. So again, like, I'm gonna make this long 5 because I'm just annoying that way. But I'm gonna cross off super strength because I have no real use for it. Right. At least me personally, I'm gonna cross off ability to read people's minds. I think the ability to read people's minds is actually is the superpower that would allow us to be the most successful in terms of, like, if you read people's minds, you can accomplish anything really. But I think it'll just be really annoying because then you'll, like, even if you could turn it off, like if you couldn't turn it off, that'd be just really annoying. I couldn't live that way. But let's say you could turn it off, you would feel so compelled to, like, cheat and be like, oh, like, what are they really thinking? And then be able to maneuver all the time. It's just, I just feel like you wouldn't be able to, like, live like a normal, authentic life. It's just like you just know everything. You just know too much. So I'm gonna go with speed because it is cheating, but I can cheat, like, ethically more often with speed. It's just like, oh, I don't want to spend an hour, like, going to this location just to pick up this, like, one thing from the store. All right. 1 second, I got it, I'm back.
Yeah.
That's pretty convenient.
Yeah. I think I would have to agree with you on this one. I think super speed to me is the one I would choose. It's a toss up though between the ability to read people's minds. I think to your point, like, so the thing is though, like, to read people's minds, you can read it. But that doesn't necessarily mean you can solve whatever it is that you're looking to solve. So let's say you're in a high stakes negotiation with somebody. Sure, you know what they're looking for, you know what they want, but that doesn't mean you can necessarily navigate the situation any more effectively. Maybe. I mean, we'd have to test it. I'd have to be able to actually read people's minds to see if that's true or not. So I think I would also choose super speed. I like the points that you made about being able to get things done really quickly. If you need groceries, you just run and get them.
Also, Alan, like you could win like a bunch of Olympic gold medals.
True. Yeah. Yeah.
But you gotta be smart, right? Like if you just like go at like 100 miles like a second, then you're obviously like, whoa,
Right.
okay,
No, yeah.
Let's go like a little bit faster.
A little bit faster.
Right.
Yeah, just a tiny bit faster. That's right. Yeah, I like that. That's good. Last question, so that we don't belabor the podcast. It's a COVID-19 related question. This is my favorite question that we asked. What is one hobby or activity you've gotten into since the beginning of the pandemic?
Oh, okay. This is more recent. I wouldn't call it necessarily a hobby, but I recently started making protein banana pancakes.
Oh, nice.
I've heard about them. I've seen them, and I'm like, tastes like real pancakes.
Yeah. Hey, there you go.
Like, no flour or nothing. Tastes like real pancakes.
Oh, really? So it's using like protein powder instead of flour?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Protein powder, like a banana, and then like egg whites, even egg whites.
Yeah.
Get
the protein from that. Yeah. I would probably add the yolks as well.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I like one.
Yeah.
I got one egg and a little bit of like egg white. Yeah.
I see. Yeah, because that is a binding agent as well. I am not a chef by any means, but I do know that yolks and a fat source like that is a binding agent. That's good. I thought you were going to go with your cop-out answer of you learned to cut your own hair. But, which is really impressive to me. That's such an impressive fact that I would want to share it every day. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I want to go different this time.
Right. Another cop-out that we both could have used is that we started this podcast. That was technically COVID related. The activity that I'm going to share, so my girlfriend actually is a movement instructor, like yoga and Pilates and all that. And she, because of COVID, has started teaching virtual classes. And so she does it, a couple times a week. And so that's an activity that I've actually gotten into as well since the beginning of the pandemic, is I'm taking all of her classes, or as many as I can. So it's, 1 to 2 times a week, and the movement type ranges all the time. So sometimes it's, high intensity HIIT or whatever. And then other times it's more kind of the nuances of moving different joints in your body and very meditative kind of focused movement. And so I've kind of gotten into that whole world of different things and learned a lot from her and on that space. So that's definitely something new in the pandemic. It's a new activity. I wouldn't call it a hobby either, but it's an activity I've been doing. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, we'll give her a shout out. So there we go. That's kind of it. That's the fast 5 for this podcast episode. Josh, thank you so much for indulging us on the fast 5, but also for taking the time to think of your favorite episodes from 2020.
I did spend a lot of time with that, Alan, as you know.
Yeah. You didn't just think of them a minute before the podcast. This is at least a couple weeks in the making. But I really do. I think we've done an incredible job, because this is entirely new for both of us starting this podcast, and actually the feedback that we've gotten from our listeners has been really what motivates us to keep going. We've had a lot of positive feedback. We've had a lot of people listen to the episodes and actually
my favorite when Bill Gates said it was a great podcast. That was my favorite.
Yeah. When he took the time to actually tweet about the SeamlessMD podcast. If you don't believe us, you can search SeamlessMD Podcast on Twitter, and you can look if you want. You can also tell other people to maybe research the SeamlessMD Podcast. Who knows?
Tell Bill he deleted it by accident to retweet it.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I've appreciated this whole year, or at least the half of the year that we've started the podcast in. We've covered a lot of different topics. We'll have a list of all of our topics in the show notes, the ones that we've highlighted throughout this episode. And if you haven't heard some of those episodes, we say that they're our top episodes for a reason. There's definitely some good information in all of those episodes. So do take a look and listen to those episodes. Again, share it with your friends and family and colleagues. And if you do have any if you do have any recommendations for people who should be on the podcast, who you'd want to learn from, who you'd want to listen to about specific topics, let us know. Throw their name in the hat. If you made it this far into the podcast, thank you so much for listening, and we hope to keep entertaining you and educating you next year into 2021. But for now, we'll sign off for the holidays, and we're wishing you all the best.
Thanks, everyone. Happy 2021. See you next year.